Do you like silky tones and pendulums? Are you curious about how to craft words to take someone to a state of trance? Or would you like to explore trance as a subject? Well, this is a podcast with a focus on all things hypnotic. My name is Fish the Hypno Bear, and I will be your host. I will share my personal experience and knowledge on how to utilize words, touch, implements, and the environment around you to practice and experience trance, along with other uses for hypnosis. And we are going to be discussing, with this episode, Hypnotic Inductions Part 2, where we're going to look at overload induction, confusion, and stress inductions at the end. Now, for those of you that listened to Part 1 on relaxation, this is going to be a very different approach that can be very effective for people that might struggle with relaxation and just basically slowing the mind down. Overload is basically speeding the mind up. It's filling it with so many inputs and ideas that it shuts down. It basically short circuits in a way, and there's a few ways that can be converted into a true induction, and we'll cover those. We're going to talk about two different types of overload. First, the 7 plus or minus 2. Now, the 7 plus or minus 2 you may have heard of. It is based on the assumption the brain can only hold 7 ideas at once, plus or minus 2. And this is ideas, inputs, sensory. Basically, beyond that point, it shuts down, or wants to. It hits the point of no more processing. And I'd imagine most people experience this even in daily life, where there's too many things. Just too much is going on, and they can't handle one more thing. And for most people, when that occurs, that's a very unpleasant and unwelcome occurrence. But in this case, it's intended, and it doesn't need to be unpleasant. It can be rather enjoyable, actually. So, the way I like to do this, and I may offer my question sheet, is when I'm going to work with the person, I actually ask them different questions so I can fit the induction to them. Because when we're giving ideas, sensations, inputs, if it doesn't quite fit with the individual, it could be less effective. And it might make their mind work in the way I don't want it to. Because when it comes to hypnosis and you're the hypnotist, you want to be in control. The best way to do it is to know how the mind of your subject works. Now, for the 7 plus or minus 2, I always start by explaining what it is to my subject. I'll actually tell them what I'm going to do and how it's going to work. And some might think that that might be less effective if they know what's happening, but no. For 2 reasons. One, with this method, the more thoughts and ideas you give to the subject, the more effective it is, because it gives them one more thing to have to handle and concentrate on. Another reason is, if something doesn't work after I explain it, then for me personally, I think I'm doing it wrong, because the idea of hypnosis, and we'll do more, I'm going to do a future episode discussing conditioning and priming more specifically, but I will actually prime my subject with what I'm going to do, and also condition it to work better, which means even if I point out that you're listening and focusing and that I have taken that power, it's still going to be effective. Or even if you try to resist, it will only increase the effectiveness. It's basically these little key points to utilize in the trance, in the induction. So, don't be afraid to explain as you're going, as long as you do it in the rhythm and the motion and the manner that you're trying to. The way I start is by giving them the first idea to focus on. Now, the first idea isn't that important. It doesn't necessarily matter what you start on. I like to key that into what I feel would be the easiest for that person to start thinking about. One common thing I'll do is have them think of the sound of rain falling on a tin roof, because that evokes a lot of things for different people. They could hear the sound, they could maybe even see the rain. It might make them imagine where they were last time they had heard the sound. So it basically, though we frame it as one idea, one thought at once, It's really more than that. And they realize that at a subconscious level first. Another key thing to keep in mind when we're doing overload, much like any other type of induction, is thinking about how your subject's mind works. And I am going to have a little mini podcast episode that's going to talk about minds and basically how they work, what to do with your subject if they're highly visual or highly aural, or if they see nothing when they close their eyes. Basically, every mind is very different. So keep an eye out for that. And knowing that I'm not going to delve too deeply into that at this point. First idea is that rain, how it sounds on a tin roof. And I'll really lean into it, describing that sound and making it the most important, highest focus of their mind at that time. And I'll also talk about how easy it is to have one idea, one thought, because anyone could do that. One is incredibly easy. While I'm doing this, I'm speaking at a slightly faster than normal tone. I'm not going for relaxing or smooth or silky, if you will. I'm talking kind of at this speed and at this pace. And I am assuming a manner that is confident, that is in control, that makes them have to keep up just a little bit, but it's not overwhelming at this point. It's still very simple, and I even point out how simple it is and how easy it is for them to keep up. And at that point, I'll introduce a second one, and then a third, and I'll just kind of keep going down this line of ideas. A few things to make this simpler as the hypnotist is I have a list in front of me, and it'll list out the things I'm going to cover that are key to the subject I'm working with. So for my template of questions that I ask for overload, prior to engaging the trance, I'll either ask them this in person or send them a questionnaire, and it'll involve what their favorite color is, if they like the sound of rain, what their favorite activity is, their favorite treat, their favorite sound, favorite texture. I'll ask if they have a special route that they take regularly that they have memorized, if they enjoy the sound of rain on a roof, what other favorite sounds they might have, if they like looking at themselves in the mirror. Just a list of these favorites. And the key is a minimum of 7, though I recommend 12. I recommend having 12 different ones prepared in case you need more than that average 7 plus or minus 2 number. And I will have this written down in front of me as I go through them. And you can have a standard template that will work for most people, such as if you're doing a group trance. For example, and I do this as a group trance, the 11 ideas I use are walking down a road or a path, favorite color, password or code, sound of rain, looking at a window, staring into the flames of a fire, favorite treat, sound of a bell, drawing a perfect circle in your mind, lying in a warm sand on a beach, sinking into the sand, and staring up at the stars as they shoot and fall around you. And then I'll also include the sound of my voice and discussing the overload. And having these prepared makes for a better time also. If while performing the trance as the test, you're trying to remember the different things, it can affect your own control in mind. So having them in front of you means you're overloading the subject and not yourself. So after I get those all settled, and I know what I'm going to do, and I get their answers, I have this in front of me. Because some hypnotists, they get caught up in their trance inductions. And they get hypnotized a little bit themselves. And with overload, it's very ineffectual to be hypnotized while you're hypnotizing your subject, because this requires a lot of focus and energy. So I'm going down the list. So I'm going to give an example of that beginning. Go ahead and listen to this objectively, because I'm going to do this. I'm going to do an example right now of the beginning of an overload induction. So you're going to close your eyes, and you're going to think about the idea of rain falling on a tin roof. The sound of it as it echoes, as it patters. Where you might have been the last time you heard it. And just fully focus entirely on the idea of rain on that tin roof. And that is one idea, and one idea is incredibly easy, isn't it? That's right. Anyone can focus on one thought and one idea. So let's make it a little more challenging. Let's add a second one. I want you to think of your favorite color. Whatever that favorite color is of yours, and where it appears in nature, where it appears in your home, anywhere you see it, whatever that color is. What it feels like, what it tastes like, what it smells like, the sensation of it, how it absorbs you into that color. So that's 2 now. The sound of rain and that color. And again, 2 ideas. It's a little more challenging, but it's still pretty easy, wouldn't you say? Yeah. So let's add a third. I need to think of a password or a code, one that you know very well, and you're not going to share it with me. I don't want you to write it. I want you to say it. So I want you to think it. Forward and backward and forward, running through every number, every digit, every numeral, whatever that code is, back and forth, forward and back. And hold on to that to me, okay? Alright, so we've got the sound of the rain, we've got your color, we've got the code. And now for those of you, that are listening to this podcast and this episode, that's how I began. Introduce one idea, then another idea, then another idea. And each time I do, I'm reminding them of the prior one, because the key is to not let them forget any single one of those inputs. It's very important that they keep up with this. As I'm doing this, I always have them go back, circle back, and it's most effective to be able to see them, because if you can actually look at them, you know how they're reacting, you know how they're responding. You can see their breathing cues, their shifts, the way their eyes move behind their eyelids. And that helps not to go too far or too short, because again, some people really are a true 7. Some are as few as a 4 or 5. I experienced one who was over 20. So be prepared. Another thing to keep in mind with this induction is it's not for everyone. Some people might experience this one and feel anxiety or panic. And it's important to realize that that's okay. It does not need to work on everyone. It does not need to be for everyone. Alright, so we're going with those 3, and I'm going to add another one. And every time I add one, I remind them of the prior ones. And at some point, what I'll also do is I'll introduce one that they weren't thinking of, which is my voice. My voice is another one. I will also add in the idea of what I'm doing to them, the induction, manner, and method itself. So right there, those are 2 extras, which is fun to pop in the middle or at the end if you need a little bit more to push them right over that edge. And the key is just keeping on going with these until you see that they're at that point, when their mind is ready to just turn off. And there's a couple ways you can indicate and check back with them on this. You can watch them, or you can actually ask them to repeat back the things that you've given them to think about, which can be quite fun. It just depends on your subject and if they're able to speak while under. Some people, if you have them speak, it takes them right out of it and it's over. Others, it's something easy for them to do, and for some, that's just one extra thing that pushes them over the top when they've got to actually recite back what it is that you put in their minds. So we go through all these, and whatever number is that magical number you get to that they're done, you've got a couple different ways to approach that. You can do alright, now that's a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts. And it's really difficult and challenging to think about and hold on to all those things, isn't it? And I'll maybe nod, maybe make a sound, maybe nothing. You could offer, wouldn't it be nice just to let go of all of it? Just let every single thought drift away, slip away, fall away, and just be gone? Just like that? And that's one option, where basically you just give that option to let it all go. And for some, that's effective enough as that with a snap or some other slight pattern disrupt. Others, you might need to individually pluck away each idea or thought. It should be, now we're going to remove that. The rain stops. The color fades into darkness. That code dematerializes behind your eyes. You could go through each of them like that, where then it leaves them with nothing. Another option is now all your focus is going to shift from all of those to one thought, one idea, one word, which is mine, and focus fully on the words and the scenes that I paint for you, or the instructions that I give. So it's then pulling all of their focus that they've got scattered to all those different ideas and thoughts, just one idea, one thought, one focus. Which then it can shift into that true induction, add in a deepener, count them down, do a scene, whatever it is that you've got planned. It's very effective, it's very simple, you can customize it, make it your own. That's just the way I approach it. Of course, I always do different changes depending on who I'm working with. But the basic ingredients for a 7 plus or minus 2 induction is the 7 to 12. I recommend having 12 inputs available, just in case your person needs more, and also mixing them up with different things: sound, sensation, sight, just engaging all the senses and memory recall. And getting that, then you have them in their position, lying or sitting, where they're safe and comfy, and explain what it is you're going to do to them. Go through the first one, then the second one, then the third, looping back. And I like to use terms like looping, moving, shifting, use that kind of language. And also language such as now don't forget. So it's basically reminding them repeatedly. What I'm going to do too is I'm going to record an overload induction full example, just a miniature hypnotic file that does overload as an induction. It's just going to be a basic standard 7 plus or minus 2 with a deepener and very, very brief content that's a little relaxing, then a awakener. And I'm going to have that available here either right as this one is out or around the same time. Probably have it on YouTube and on SoundCloud, so keep an eye out for that. That could be helpful. So that was 7 plus or minus 2, which again, one of my favorites, highly effective. However, it is not the only way you can do overload. There are endless ways that this can be done. A friend of mine actually taught me a method that she uses for meditation, which is a very effective way, which is the use of screens, where imagining being in a space where there's multiple screens to watch, and there's different things playing on every one of them, and focus on all of them, and then turning more of them on, and then turning them off until there's one. So it's an idea of a visual and sound overload, where the processing is highly vision and sound. Others could be actual use of loud sound and sensation and idea and words, where basically they're there with you and you're doing sounds. Like you actually have rain playing, you have different sensations moving over their body, you're whispering to different ears, you're doing different levels of sounds. It's basically a true overload of the senses, where there's lots of things going on at once, and it keeps them on that edge of guessing what's going to come next, and then you release them and help relax them down. So there's a few different ways to do this. That again is just one of them. Important to make sure that's safe and effective for them, because there's no one size fits all when it comes to trance. Now let's look a little bit at confusion. Now confusion is interesting because that really works differently on everyone. One popular method is logic puzzles. Basically it's the idea of giving them a question that either is impossible to answer or is very difficult to answer. It could be, honestly, math. I personally don't use math, but it can be very, very effective, giving them calculations or things to ponder, talking about numbers and how they work. because that confuses the brain, forces them to try to focus and listen and understand, but you move just a little too fast for them. Give them just too much input where they can't quite keep up, and it short circuits the brain there too. One method I really enjoy is contraindicatory ideas. Things that don't go together but also do. And that can be very fun. An example of confusion play with the use of contraindicatory ideas is especially enjoyable with multiple tests. It can be done with only one, and I'll give an example of with one, or with two or multiple. You take your subject and establish the basic rules of the universe, if you will. You have them stand facing you, or sitting, whichever you prefer, and tell them to look down, tell them to look up, tell them to look left, and tell them to look right. And that's establishing your direction. So basically, you point to the right and have them look to your right. You point to the left, have them look at your left, and have them agree with that. And then you flip it on them and say something to the effect of, but if this is my right, that would mean it's your left, right? And they agree. And if this is your left, it's my right, right? And you go back and forth. And if you have an additional test to stand beside you in a form of a triangle of sorts, you could add into, but if it's their left, it's kind of a slight right-left or left-right, which plays with the idea of ups and downs, and to an extent of left and right, right and left. And you can go back and forth with these ideas, asking them questions, and getting them to agree with you, which actually shifts into a form of a yes set to, which I will cover in suggestibility in the future. But the point is getting them to agree with you and establishing those ideas of directions and how what they think is right is actually incorrect, and just taking them on this journey and paths of loops and circles and spirals, and just keeping them guessing until their mind is spinning a bit and they're not really sure what is what any longer. And as I said, this can be done with just one test and one subject, but it's a lot easier and more fun to have someone else to back you up on it, because with a subject and test, it is a form of power exchange. So if you have another test, which the subject is also comfortable with and will defer to in trance or in any form of power exchange, actually, they're more inclined to want to agree. And you've got two people in authority now over someone who's deferring, so they're even more inclined to agree. And that makes it easier to take them on this confusing path. And this can just stay this light, confusing fun, and leave it at that. You can keep it going until their mind is quite spinning, and then just point out that idea of, but no, that's really important, is it? Why don't you just like to forget about all that and just let your mind go blank? It's easier to just do that, to let go of all those ideas and thoughts, right? The point being is any of these could be on their own fun play or in an induction. So that's an example of a fun multiple test, confusion, misdirection, induction. Another example of a confusion induction is the use of ideas that do fit together, but they seem counterintuitive, such as the idea of stepping into one place, such as a river, but also being in multiple places at once, because a river never is the same. It's always moving. Or standing still on Earth, but the Earth is moving fast, it's rotating, it's revolving. Or looking up at a star and realizing that that star might not even be there anymore. It could have fallen thousands of years ago even. It's looking at history. So the idea of things that seem simple and present, but really aren't, and capitalizing on this idea for that confusion. I have an example of one of these inductions that I'm actually going to re-record, and we'll have up here probably shortly after this induction. Part 2 is out. I'll plan on having that up as well as the 7 plus or minus 2 one. But just to expand on the idea of these forms of confusion as induction, is I will say, now imagine stepping into a river and looking down into that water, how clear and present and still, but that slight current that moves, and realizing that this is not the same river as it was yesterday. It's not the same river as it will be tomorrow. Even in this very moment, as you set foot there, standing so perfectly still in this clear water, it shifts and moves, and you're in multiple places at once. You're in the past, the present, and the future. And then I just explain and expand on that idea of being everywhere at once. And as I let them settle into that idea for a moment, I tell them to look up at the sky and note how the stars have all come out and how beautiful they are. And if you look at that one star right there, the bright and beautiful glimmering gem of light, and think about, that is not there now. You are looking at the past, at history. This moment in time, you're staring up at that sky, up at those stars. They might have fallen or burned out. And thinking about the contradictory ideas of being in the present but gazing at the past. And then I'll have them think about their feet on the ground, even on the firm rock in that river, and realizing that even as they seem to be standing still, the earth is constantly revolving and rotating at massive speeds. So they're standing still and constantly moving. And I'll have them focus on these different ideas and concepts, which don't quite make sense, but they're all accurate, and use that to take them into a level of confusion induction. An interesting thing to consider is, in a sense, this is a form of overload. And in reality, most forms of induction are a level of overload, because we are overloading the mind in a sense. They're just different levels. Now, confusion can be a calmer method, which is more open and welcome to some that are averse to, let's say, the 7 plus or minus 2 induction of overload. My primary subject and my girl Cookie, she does not like overload, but she enjoys confusion. I have another subject that loves overload and confusion, hates relaxation. So it's just these different things to consider and what applies to each subject. Some subjects like a variety of them, some only one. So it's important to look at these and explore. That's another method of confusion. Another method of confusion induction plays into covert induction. Now, covert hypnosis is a whole topic and a whole episode I'm going to cover in the future, but just a little brief insight into that with confusion and covert is use of gaslighting. And when I say gaslighting, I am talking again about this is agreed upon. This is, think of your edge play for those in the BDSM circles where the subject desires this. They've stated ahead of time that this is something they're interested in into. So it's not just thrust upon them. This was pre-discussed. But it makes them question the reality. And it's this light or heavy confusion of ideas and concepts they think they understood, and using these to get into their head and shift them into trance. It can be super light and silly. There was one example that actually co-confused, co-induced a past subject with a current subject of mine, actually, where she was really into gaslighting, and we played her and convinced her the term was actually lamplighting. So it's just could be super, super funny and light, or it can be very heavy and dark. It's just whatever is decided upon. And again, I'll cover this more in a future episode, but that's just another method. So as you see with both overload and confusion, there's multiple ways to do it. These are just some methods I like to employ and utilize. So feel free to take and play with as you like. I do not claim the 7 plus or minus 2. I did not invent that. I discovered it from someone else and I made it my own. Next, we're going to look briefly at the idea of mental overstimulation. This is getting more into a stress area where the subject becomes more uncomfortable. And I did talk about in previous episodes, and if you've heard me talk about inductions in person at any point, I enjoy being uncomfortable as a subject. I like the discomfort and the overwhelming and then not being able to tell real from not real. That works very well for me, but it doesn't for everyone. So mental overstimulation is very nice for me. When there's just so much going on that I can't see through it. That every effort and energy just makes it harder to think and process. Which leads us into stress induction. Now, what I'm going to say about stress induction is this is advanced stuff. This is things to use with caution, because this type of induction can cause actual mental, emotional harm to a subject if used incorrectly, if used on the wrong person. Now, subjects have agency. It's not a one-way street with hypnosis. It's not just performative. The subject is part of it and has the right and the ability to say no, to move on, to not listen. But that being said, it still can cause adverse reactions. Because when you get into the edge play of hypnosis, which, let's be honest, when you get into stress induction, which is related to fear play, that's edge play. It's taking more risk. So I would strongly advise not starting with this. I would very strongly advise working with your subject and other things prior to this, and if at all possible, experiencing it yourself first so you know what it feels like, and know what it looks like, and how it works. So I'm going to explain how it works, and I will at some point have a file that does this as an example of a stress induction. I probably won't have this as a free one. This might be one of the ones that are available in a future Patreon, because it is more risk. So, stress induction. The way this works is it's the combination of overload, humiliation, degradation, fear, and gaslighting. It takes various things at once and really calls everything that the subject feels and believes into question. It can be described as panic-inducing, or it can be described as fast and slow, intense and wonderful at the same time. I experienced it once and I loved it. I've seen some others experience it and it put them to panic attacks, so here's how it would work. It begins with talking to the subject and basically just developing that rapport. This is also with the understanding that you've pre-negotiated this and they know what's happening. So this is actually planned, not covert, not casual. This is planned. So starting to discuss, and then asking a question. Asking a question and letting them start to answer, then cutting them off. So not letting them finish. And as they're doing that, doing a combination of both praise and insulting and demeaning, basically telling them, that's so cute that they tried, and it's so nice to see them make an effort, but they're really too stupid to understand or think of anything. That'd be an example. It's basically degrading, debasing, objectifying them, while switching back and forth between building them up, and also talking at a very fast pace so they can't quite keep up mentally. And again, there's a lot to it. In fact, I might think about this and do a whole episode on this and make this a pay one, because it is so intense. I'm going to think about that. But the way it works overall is overloading, overplaying, and gaslighting the subject. So those were some methods of overload, confusion, a little bit of an introduction to the stress induction. If there's a topic you're interested in learning about, and it falls into the realm of hypnosis, or if you're curious if it might, send me an email or post a comment, and I'll add it to the list of topics to cover. If I don't have the experience in it, I'll look for a guest to join me on a future episode. If you like what you hear and would like to support me, you can do so on my Ko-fi, linked in my profile, or my Patreon, which offers a monthly subscription with special perks to follow soon. And also hit that like and subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified of future episodes. On SoundCloud, you'll be able to find some of my hypnotic files, actual trances, with at least one new file planned per month. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's okay to be confused.